We are on.
We are on.
I'm just waiting for the screen to show my.
In a minute, I've never seen that before.
Wait, on the screen. Wait, on the screen. There we go.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everybody. Today we are going to talk to three of the folks who had involvement at different stages of the development and engineering of Epcot Center. And I should pull my notes out if we're going to do that, because it helps me. Bob Gurr, who's the legend. There's no better way to get everybody awake than to start with Billy Flanagan and Tammy Tuckey singing and then have Bob Gurr in the first panel. And what we're going to do is we're going to run through, Bob and I are going to chat a little bit, and then Bob Holland over here is going to give us a little slideshow on some of his. If you've listened to his magnum opus interview on the Progress City podcast, I think there's about 4 hours on there that covers a fascinating array of Disney history. And then Steve Alcorn, many of you who have read his book, will take us through a terrific photo journey through the construction of Epcot. So we welcome Bob Gurr. And Bob, my first question is that Walt Disney was a movie maker, television, entertainment, built theme parks. What was it like at Imagineering when he suddenly decided, you know what, we should build a city?
Well, before all of that, is this on?
It is.
Before all of that, Epcot actually started about 1956, because Disneyland, as it opened, people thought it was going to fail. By Christmas time, it was going to be a success, and Walt added a whole bunch of attractions in 1956. 1958, the Brussels World's Fair started. Walt picked up a group of people and sent them over to Brussels. They had people from Walt Disney Productions, WED, and Disneyland to look at the future. Brussels, 1958. By 1960, Walt had decided there was going to do 3 attractions for the New York World's Fair. Some of it was going to talk about the future. By 1962, we sent a bunch of us up to the Seattle World's Fair. We're going to look at the future. Pretty soon, there was rumbles of a thing called Project X, which went around the company for quite a few years. Then suddenly, in 1965, about October, the news about Walt Disney World opening broke ground in publicity prematurely. Remember, there was a story about that newspaper lady working down here, sniffed around with Walt, and then one day was out at the studio and just bluntly looked at him and says, I understand you just bought all that property. And Walt was totally shocked that his whole cover had been blown. He had all this subterfuge how to buy this property. Anyway, immediately we were sent to work on Epcot. So Epcot had that kind of a head start. Now this got very, very serious between October of 1965. By 1966, in January, Walt took a group of us on the plane, the Little Mouse, to visit several companies on a sales junket. Now remember, I'm just the car guy in the company, design all this stuff, and I was assigned to transportation design for Epcot. To sit in a meeting with the chairman of the board of Westinghouse, many vice presidents, and watch Walt try to explain Epcot to these high-level business people, and I saw so many blank stares. What in the world is Walt talking about? This was my first warning that, this is not going to be easy. We went over to General Electric, same thing. What? They had a hard time trying to understand that. So I think what happened was we started to change the pitch to try to explain it a little bit better, and while getting ready to do that, Walt was gone. Epcot stopped completely for years, and it wasn't until 1972 that all of a sudden Card Walker, our then vice president of the company, said, what are we going to do? And he came over to WED, and we waited for the instructions from the top of the company. His question to us was, what are you guys going to do? And I remember we just stopped breathing. We saw that not only did we lose Walt, I think we just lost Epcot, because Card Walker, the president, did not know what we're going to do. In any event, there was a program called the Wednesday Morning Club, which was about 12 or 13 of us, a big mix all across the company, in which we were to meet every Wednesday morning for a couple hours and pick up where Walt passed off these ideas. What in the world did Walt have in mind? And he'd been gone a number of years, and we were in a pickle. What in the world is going to be an Epcot? Anyway, this was a long-winded series of meetings, went for months and months and months. Marty Sklar was there. He was the chairman of the meeting. And we found out a whole bunch of reasons why this would not work. So this is a precursor to what later was done in a book, Walt Disney and the Search for Community. Some of you own that book. This fella came around and he talked to everybody that had done any work on Epcot and interviewed every single one of them, and the idea through the Wednesday Morning Club up into the actual execution of Epcot. The last part that I had to do with it was work from 1972 to about 1978, wherein I got in a bit of a dispute over the machinery in the spaceship Earth, in which I was a little more conservative than the chief engineer, who was very frisky about doing a mechanical machine inside a golf ball. And as it turned out, everybody who works here knows the spaceship Earth is, it likes to eat wheels every night. Every morning you put wheels on the darn thing. So I didn't feel too bad when I was asked to come down here again by Arnold Lindbergh of Central Shops. We have to take a look. Do we keep fixing it, or do we stop and make a proper design for it? The answer was, the guests like it. We'll just keep running it. And you guys set a budget to buy thousands of wheels a year and sell it. So that constituted the end of my effort on it all those years, from about 1965 all the way to 78, wherein I was transferred to Tokyo Disneyland.
Bob literally just went through every question I had for you. All the questions. We were like, I'll answer this, I'll answer that. And Spaceship Earth ride system, he's just gone through. He did mention this book, but Bob said to me, get this book, and everybody read it down, or watch the video later. And he said, read the last sentence in the book, how he closes the book, which I will do. And you can see it up on the screen. It says, Imagineer Bob Gurr asked recently what he thought Walt Disney would be doing now if he were still alive, replied half seriously, still struggling with Epcot. Feel free to expound, Bob.
Well, interestingly, a lot of people question, why is this Epcot not Walt's Epcot? But a lot of other people come to Epcot every day now, and they find it one of the most charming parks in the world. I find Epcot the way it is today, and it's always different every time I come here. I'm happily looking forward at my age, 92, I want to be 100 and come in and see the next Epcot. When you ask questions about Epcot, there's a lot of obscure history that went through so many changes with so many people. So your Epcot you have here today is none of the above, in a way. But it's an Epcot that, as Walt would say with Disneyland, when it opened, it'll never be finished. So I'd like to come back in another 100 years and see the Epcot by the end of this century and see what it looks like. So I think it's going to turn out, Walt was going to have the experimental prototype community tomorrow, but it turns out this is a living, changing experiment with every kind of ideas, not necessarily focused on the community, where the original idea that he had basically was he would provide the land, provide the infrastructure, and invite all kinds of creative companies around America to come here and put on experimental portions of ideas with their employment. The employees would be living here as a sabbatical for quite some periods of time to demonstrate firsthand to our guests what the future is like as it would be coming along. But there was a great number of reasons why that would not work, particularly within a jurisdiction of a federal government, state governments, local jurisdictions, all the kind of thing. Do people on sabbatical live here? Where do they vote? Where do their kids go to school? On and on and on. So it was an illustration of when you dream big, you're going to have to slow down and you're going to have to start filling in the blanks of practical reality. And that's what we faced in that Wednesday morning club. We kind of anguished over all those years until we got an Epcot described enough that Cardwalker, who's a born salesman, could go out and start to sell. You're going to ask me about selling.
Well, you answered it already. You told us you went on these trips with Walt and they were agog when you asked them questions. But I did want to tell everybody that Bob has a program from their trip to Westinghouse, January of 1966, that will be with him when he's out there signing, so he can show it to you and tell you about his trip out there to Westinghouse and how confounded they were by whatever Walt was telling them, right?
But at the same time, they were showing Walt experimental things. And remember, this is January '66. Walt and I are looking at the first laser we have ever seen, and I remember vividly Walt looking at that and looking at the rest of us, and the group says, "Oh boy, you know how we could really tell stories better with laser?" So Walt was always looking at the next big scientific thing, not just for the science. He always saw stuff as storytelling tools. And that was a very vivid experience to see him learn like that.
Well, thank you, Bob Gurr, for your stories, and we're going to let some of these other guys give their little slideshow now, if that's all right. And we're going to sit here like... Because we're going to play a little Statler and Waldorf here as these guys are running through their presentation. Just a caveat here, you'll notice we're not doing a long introduction for each of these folks. That's why you have the program books with the lengthy biographies in there, so we don't spend a lot of time on stage introducing people to the